Welcome to another episode of Foolproof Theology, where we're trying to bring you great Christian content from Christian thinkers today who are helping us think more biblically in a godly manner about events in our world. And so I'm glad to have on the episode today Tim Bushong. He is a Christian music artist. You can go find his music on Apple or Spotify. He's also a pastor. He's hosting a conference coming up on Christianity and politics. And I'm just really glad to have him on the show. So, Tim, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me, Chase.
So, Tim, I wanted to get to know kind of your music background. I mean, the music you put out is really interesting. It reminds me back in the day, or at least back in my day, of early like Mars Hill stuff. You had this Red Letter band. You had other things. It's very rock forward. And so if you go find it on iTunes or Apple Music, as it's now called, that's kind of the ethos I got. But were you a Christian musician before? Were you a musician then turned Christian? What's kind of your story with that?
Well, yeah, I was born in 1960, and I know I don't look it. Thank you. And I was a musician from the get-go. Both my parents were musicians, very accomplished, by the way. Mom was a choir teacher. I learned to read music. All of us kids did. Started trombone, 6th grade. Same summer, picked up the bass guitar, learned guitar by the 8th grade, and Jethro wants to be a rock star. So always had a band, always had something percolating, songwriting, but it was the 70s, and there was a lot of other things going on. And so fast forward to 1987, I repented. I wanted to get serious about the Lord, kind of put music down. I'd been married for 4 years, still married to the wonderfulest girl ever, Heidi. Happy 40 this last summer. That's 40 years, man.
Congratulations.
So, and she was the perfect band spouse. You want to talk about coming alongside to help, and she supported me in everything we did. So I put music down for a little while. Then I started writing again, formed a band called Love War. And we got a deal with Pachyderm, which is like a subsidiary of Word. John and Dino Elefante taught me a lot about recording and arranging. That was important. And then that band morphed into a band called the Channel Surfers. And that would have been 97, 98, 99, did a lot of road work. But our family was getting older, and I'd been teaching in our local Reformed Baptist Church, like a college class. And I just thought, I can't go on the road all the time, so I'm going to pull that back. But I did, for our second Channel Surfer record, I renegotiated our contract and got them to double our advance. And with that money, I bought gear kind of as a future proof, because I knew I could engineer and record and record other musicians. So I opened up a studio in 2000, got off the road just about 6 months earlier. And I've done that since 2000. For 23 years. And then in 2005, a group of us from this same church, there were just a number of philosophical issues that were going on and some theological, and we planted a church. And so I was the first man ordained in that group. And then in 2017, our local little Southern Baptist church, just 1 mile from my house. So these are deep roots. I'm one of those land and soil guys, if you want to say that.
Sure.
They lost their pastor. And we were thinking at that time, early preliminary stages of, hey, we should plant a church because, Tim's getting older. I don't want to be driving a half an hour to church every Sunday. And they were wanting to move farther. So I came here. They voted me in July of 17. And I've been here ever since, and steadily trying to plod along and reform this little church. We started with 11 old people, and now we've got 120, and they're just babies everywhere. So if you don't hear crying, your church may be dying.
Agreed. That's a great way to put it.
So that's the synopsis of me. And I'm a grandfather now, and all 3 of our children are grown and married. And Heidi and I are just living the dream here in northern Indiana.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, I'm curious about the Christian music industry. I grew up and I was leading worship at my high school and other places. Thought I was kind of going into music direction, but was quickly dissuaded from that because it's just, it's a very complicated industry, and I want to do something with my hands, which is funny now because now I'm a pastor and you kind of think a lot and meet with people. But
Yeah.
in the Christian music industry, were you during that time with the Channel Surfers? Were you kind of in the mix with kind of the Nashville crowd and all these artists and musicians that are big names like Michael W. Smith Michael W. Smith and Stephen Curtis Chapman? Was that kind of a stream you were in, or were you in with as I think you said Pacderm or whatever the
Pachyderm, and then later on it was Organic Records based out of
okay
Portland. So our music was much more on the edgy, laugh in the face of death, live on the edge world of progressive metal and funk. That's kind of a decent explanation, even of both bands. But yeah, I got to meet just loads of people. And there's an old adage: the bigger they are, the nicer they are. Well, that's kind of true. And we did all kinds of festivals, and hung out with guys like POD and a bunch of the Tooth and Nail artists we were friends with. Also the recording, the first album we recorded all the basic tracks, drums, bass, and one guitar pass in Nashville. Then they transferred that to what was called ADAT, which was a format to use high definition VHS tape, 8-track. Oh wow, 8 tracks! We're living in eating high on the hog there. At the time that was the technology. And then we did all the overdubs here in this room, and then went back down to Nashville for the mix. The second album, we tracked all the tracks here in this little room, and then mixed it in Nashville on a big SSL console. All you nerds will know what I'm talking about there.
That's great.
And yeah, so yeah, it was a fun time. There's an old saying, Glenn Kaiser said this years ago: if you see an issue in Christian music, you're probably going to see the same issue behind the pulpit. It's not that dissimilar. And the idea is that you go to some town. And it was really cool. I was the oldest guy in the band. They said, who are these 3 guys and their dad? Hey, I was flying the Hawaiian shirt and the denim shorts and the Chuck Taylors, but you can't hide maturity. So anyway, yeah, we had a great time. The festivals were good. It was kind of cool to travel to Farmington, New Mexico, and you're the opening band and the crowd knows all your songs. Now that's weird.
Yeah.
And the biggest crowd we played in front of was in Brazil at a big, huge outdoor festival in a soccer arena. AC/DC had played there the week before, and Iron Maiden was booked for the next week. And so there's 55,000 people in this stadium.
Crazy.
And you're like, yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
But all of those things have a shelf life. And I'm perfectly happy to be where I am now. I wouldn't change a thing.
That's great, man. One of the things I've noticed, and this Aaron Wren really tipped me off to this in 2020 when I started listening to a lot of Aaron Wren's content, was Christian radio. And I grew up kind of saturated in Christian culture and all the trappings therein. And so I can't remember in Dallas what it was, but we had the K-Love version, the kind of like, the poppy, Amy Grant, all Newsboys, all these are going to get airtime on that one. And then you've got the edgy one, the kind of like the Tooth and that kind of stuff. And my wife always listened to that stuff growing up. I didn't know her at the time. I grew up listening to K-Love. And so when I met her, we had lots of fun conversations about that. But I have a hard time listening to K-Love. One of the things that Aaron Wren tipped me off to is like when you're raised and your mother's driving you around, driving you to school, driving you to soccer practice, all this kind of stuff. And that's the kind of music you're listening to, and you associate that with Christianity.
Yes.
I don't have a better word to describe it than effeminate. And so like, I don't know how to reconcile that. I was thinking about an interview this morning, and on the way home from a church event last night, I was listening to Brooks and Dunn, Brand New Man. And I was listening to it and I was like, this is essentially what I hear on Christian radio. I mean, there's like one.
I saw your tweet.
Yeah, it's like 99% there.
Yes.
Of like how we talk about a relationship with God. Why do you think it's so pervasive? Like, how would you kind of assess that situation with the Christian music industry? I mean, generally, I I have some friends in that industry, but I feel like it's prone to effeminate ways of relating to the Lord.
Hmm.
How do you understand that?
Well, first of all, it is an industry. And so if you're not making money, then it's a labor of love, which that becomes its own thing. Then you can be uncancelable. Then you can be unfiltered and say exactly what you want. The other thing is that we got to remember the scenario you just described was the quote unquote soccer mom. Drive around the minivan, we got a 98 Villager and 3 kids in the back, and we're driving around. Who's doing the driving? Well, it's your mom. And so this radio content is geared to appeal to that audience. So mothers, even maybe some singles in there, but mostly moms from between 25 and 42. That's their demographic. And you couple in all the theological underpinnings, right? I mean, Jesus Calling sold copies. I
Yeah.
am what? How did any? Are you crazy? We went and visited some good friends of mine I'd grown up with, went to kindergarten with him. They're a little more on the pietistic, touchy-feely side, I couldn't believe I saw Jesus Calling. Now, I'm not just picking on that. There's a lot of things,
Yeah,
but
right.
that's just an example of the kind of mentality. And that becomes the benchmark then of true spirituality.
Right.
And Ann Douglas wrote about this in her book, late 70s book called The Feminization of America, tracing it through New England and the young, intelligent but sensitive boys
Sure.
that would write poems. Those are the candidates for ministry you want.
Yeah. Isn't that
And
interesting?
and now it's all kind of baked into what we do. And I was just thinking about this morning because our church service is more liturgical, call to worship, opening hymn, confession. But we're Baptist, there's no question about that. And the singing is, I just describe it as lively hymnody. We sing
Yeah.
psalms, hymns. Everybody's engaged, singing loud. And if we sing an amen at the end, well, you're going to get 2 or 3 toddlers kind of late to the game, and you hear this 2-second delay. Amen. It's all good, right? But that is not normal anymore.
Yeah.
That's the exception. Normal is 20 to 25 minutes of an experience where the lights are dimmed, and the pastor may be on the front row just weeping and stuff,
Yeah.
and then he gets up to preach.
Yeah.
Well, what he just did was worship. Now he's preaching.
Yeah.
So there are worldview issues, there are doctrinal commitments here, a lot of things going on. But it's basically the soccer mom that needs to be buying the products that are advertising on whatever the station is.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing
Yeah.
as a Christian music artist and being a pastor, and I love the way this is going because I've always been curious about this. Our worship pastor writes his own stuff too,
Mm-hmm.
and he's produced a couple of albums that you can go find online. But in your church, what prevents you? What makes you go, I'm going to produce this music out here for a broader audience? In our church service, we're not going to sing the songs that I write, or maybe you do. Like, how do you discern that as a pastor? What does that look like?
Somebody just, I just released Battle Hymns 2, Battle Hymns for Weary Souls. That title was given to me by Michael Foster. Thanks, brother. Battle Hymns 2, Hail to Jesus. Hail to Jesus we released in April of this year, and it's the whole church singing in an old one-room schoolhouse. That has gotten some traction. Almost every week I get an email from somebody, hey, we'd like the sheet music chords. Well, I don't have the heart to say, they're at the bottom under the lyrics on YouTube, but I'll just send it to them, and they're singing it in church, and they're singing the song in front of abortion clinics. They're singing it in street preaching, playing it full volume on their whatever they're using PA system, and then jumping off of Psalm 110 into a sermon on the Lordship of Christ. Well, I'll be honest, there's one thing that prevents us from doing a full production Sunday morning. We have a little building. 80 people fills the auditorium, and we have an average attendance of around 110, 120. So we have people in the overflow room. And if a really talented drummer showed up, may work him in.
Yeah.
But right now we don't. We have me on acoustic. We have Caleb Marshall with the dulcimer and flute. By the way, he's all over this new record. You can hear him in the song "Hail to Jesus," and he has all the trills. He's in the pocket. It's like, wow. You want to talk about the last 7-8% of a song is going to be those extra little things on top. Even bringing a tambourine on the second chorus at the end of a song gives it lift. Well, he's brilliant. And so the other thing is that we got to remember that a church is comprised of all of the body of Christ. You ever notice, you were in a church planning network, you notice that those churches that were geared to a certain demographic, they don't tend to last like the
Yeah.
churches that are just plain old churches like Jesus wants us to do.
Yeah. Right.
So part of it's the appropriate nature of a worship service. And I do think that the acoustic guitar as present in that music changes a lot. I did a music seminar one time for a friend of mine up in Michigan. It was a men's retreat, and we were talking about music. And I brought my guitar, and we opened up the Cantankerous Christi hymnal, and I started playing. I said, well, this is a regular rotation. And one of the guys just said, you know what? This is so weird. We sing the same song, same tempo, and it didn't sound anything like this.
Right.
Well, it's because you're driving it a little more. Piano, organ, great, love it. But why not add and bring it to a level where, okay, we're not in the 17th century anymore. This is the 21st century. You can do this in an appropriate way. You mentioned Hillsong. I'm guessing the West Coast version or the Michigan version?
West Coast, yeah.
Okay. Woo. Right. So I'm a 70s guy. My roots are firmly planted in Aerosmith and Joe Walsh and ZZ Top and AC/DC, right? That's me. If you want the kind of music that gets turned up in the car, I don't care. I don't even know what they're saying half the time. I just like how it sounds, and it's visceral and manly, and you've got that kind of tension. As long as there's, Ronnie Montrose said years ago that it's so important to have the right commensurate silence versus the sound, so that the dynamic impact, and that's why I did the James White Radio Free Geneva. I thought, man, this is a heavy topic. You need some heavy music, and that's where A Mighty Fortress came from, So there's an appropriate level of bombast that you can incorporate on a Sunday morning. Once you pass that, people are going to check out, and it's all about the congregation. It's their voice that needs to be heard.
Yeah. So how do you help a congregation that maybe, because I remember this when we planted early on, most of the advice we were getting, and we're in our 20s and we're just trying to figure out how to reach. We always had a particular emphasis on reaching men. That was something that was very prominent back in the network we were part of back in the day, at least. And so they would always encourage. One of the things we heard, and I won't name the church, but it was a pretty sizable church. And they were like, well, in order for men to sing loudly, you have to dim the lights down. You've got to make the music really loud so that they don't have to hear their own voice. And so we didn't adopt that wholesale, but we were like, that's interesting. And I think over time, I would say we've definitely shifted away from that. So now in this new building we're renovating, it's not going to be dark. It's going to be a white sanctuary with natural light, lots of lighting. How do you help a church, especially the men? How do you help men begin to just sing loudly in church? For me, it was fairly natural. I was in choir. I was always into music. I don't mind hearing my own voice. I don't mind, if I'm the only one. Yeah. But for a lot of men, they're very, reticent, intimidated. So how do you train men to sing together loudly?
Well, to quote the famous Christian artist Willie Nelson, there's nothing I love more than hearing my own voice. That's not quite true, is it? So one of the things I've noticed in the most recent spate of Christian music is that the men's vocals tend to be in a range that's not, well, where you hear me speaking right now. That's kind of low. There's a certain range in which I remember when we first joined this other church years ago, and they had the Trinity hymnal, the old OPC blue hymnal. And there are a lot of songs in there where there will be sustained E E. That's okay. I got my keyboard here. I don't need to play it. It's a little high. So we would transpose down, and there's a comfortable range there. Now, that's the technical aspect. One of the other things that we got to remember is that these big new churches are designed to cancel natural acoustic sound. That's brutal.
Mm.
When you're even in a room where the band's cranking, and that's supposed to get you to sing louder, all you hear is your own. You don't hear the surrounding natural overflow of reflections off of the ceiling and the wall and the front and the back. It's just weird. Now, for a sound man, it's a dream because, hey, now you're in control. We can bring the guitar up and bring that background vocal down, whatever. But it doesn't lend itself to congregational singing. A friend of mine's got a church down in Louisiana, and it's an old Unitarian building, but it's designed for singing.
Mm.
And wow, it is something else. Everything, and there's you don't have those weird standing waves. Again, I'm nerding out here, but everything's got this kind of natural curvature to the corners in the room. There's an old principle in acoustics where you don't have your walls parallel. That way they don't get those weird out of phase sounds. That's not how they build new church buildings. It just isn't,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So as far as encouraging men, there are ways to lead without seeming like you're wearing it on your sleeve. I used to tell young couples I was counseling, having trouble with a 2 or 3 year old. I said, well, to be honest, there's a little bit of a dog principle where you should get to the point where you just open the door and look at the ground and the dog goes out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, kids aren't dogs, we know that, but there's a sense in which there are expectations there. I do it by just singing like a man and singing loudly. Come
That's
on,
great.
join me, let's go, woo! Like John Belushi in Animal House. Did we give up when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? No, come on, yay! Everyone sits there like, what do we do?
Yeah, right.
It's not like that. Okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good encouragement, and it's helpful to think
Yeah.
about that stuff a lot. So, what's interesting is that you Christian musician turned pastor. You've got this conference coming up that some of my friends pointed out for me on Christianity and politics. It's something that I just taught my church about just last night,
Yep.
and so it's a topic that we've reflected a lot as elders at our church. We are very much in kind of this, spell of secularism. We always knew it wasn't exactly true, but very much like neutral public square, all this kind of stuff. Don't be too loud about politics. So I'm curious, what kind of made you want to go, we need to have this conference, we need to do this to equip the church? What sparked your interest in doing a conference on Christianity and politics?
So just a little bit of context. I am a Schaeffer fan. I cut my teeth on Francis Schaeffer in the late 80s. So for me, hearing the stories of how even Christian colleges would schedule conflicting events when they were bringing in whatever happened to the human race just disgusted me. It just is so I don't want to say the word, but it rhymes with say. For them to do that was abysmally bad. Abortion is not a fit topic for discussion, right? James White talked about that growing up. Even the topic of homosexuality. He's going to write a book. Well, we don't talk about that. Well, of course you don't talk about that because you're not involved, right? You don't have neighbors who, maybe struggle with these temptations and stuff. So the church that we planted in 2005 ended up joining the CREC. And so basically we didn't have any other option. If you're going to have both Paedo and Credo people in the congregation, there's not a lot of choices. And I love the men in that group. A lot of dear friends, close friends to this day. So coming out of that into the SBC, I already knew it's not going to be the same thing. When I took this pastorate, I reached out to a number of different men that I respected a lot, got all kinds of different advice, like the multifaceted diamond that it is. Tom Askell told me, just preach good sermons, for a year. Don't worry about changing stuff. And that helped, because that got me to hone my oratory, because I think my content was good. I've taught for years, preached for years, but it's a little different. Sunday, every week, And so in getting to know and be a part of the SBC, I realized that there were some ways in which I was a fish out of water. The philosophical and theological commitment to sola scriptura. These guys will say, well, we're inerrantists. Well, you're practically not. I would hear these conferences and little retreats they'd have on leadership, and I just raised my hand. Are we talking about pastors and deacons here?
Right.
Ooh, and I would get called a biblicist. I mean, I've been a biblicist for a long time. So in 2018, as everyone probably knows, I think it was TGC and the ERLC put together a conference on the anniversary of MLK. And I watched some of that, and I realized, wow, I'm not only not in tune with these guys, I'm the opposite.
Yeah.
This is not good. They are not applying biblical standards of justice. They are showing partiality. They're allowing grievances to fester that have been, how many times, And I understand it's a weird world we live in. I do agree there are systemic issues. One of them was enacted by LBJ and the Great Society programs. Horrible.
Yep.
Great Society. Wait a minute. Am I right there? Yeah. Not New Deal. I'm
that's a different guy.
Yeah, it's a different guy. He was worse. But anyway.
Yeah.
Tell that to your wife's grandma and see the you don't understand. You weren't there. So yeah, there's a lot to that. And so in September of 2018, I thought, you know what? I'm going to tackle this. I'm going to preach a series, and I don't know what to call it. And I want it to be provocative. And my nephew, Ezekiel Maxton, who's now in seminary, go get him, Tiger. He said, well, just call it Jesus in Politics. That's exactly what you're going to be talking about. Oh, okay. So I did. And I can't remember how many sermons were in that. That was during the time that the man who's now Supreme Court Justice was being accused of doing stuff he was in high school by one person. Right. So that was great. I had already preached a sermon on justice. Now we're going to do Justice 2.0 and deal with the necessity of 2 or 3 witnesses. Well, what if he gets away with it? Okay, what is it? Better to hang 99 men than one guilty go free because you don't have a system of justice. Right. You don't have ultimate justice in eternity, So I did that series, and it was pretty well received. The church is growing. Real life goes on. We released a Love War record that was 25 years ago songwriting, but we decided let's record it here in the big room. It's cool. So a lot of things going on. And then comes 2020. Our daughter Rachel got married in Carlsbad, California on March, you're going to kill me if I get it wrong, 10th or 11th. It was right before everything shut down.
Sure.
So we flew out, no masks at O'Hare. We fly back, masks at O'Hare.
Right.
And it's the election year. And Donald Trump has governed better than he campaigned.
Right.
There's no question about it. And so I thought, okay, and everywhere in this area of the country, you might see a Biden sign. We understand that this isn't just politics. This stands for a worldview commitment on a level that I don't think anyone understood. And now here it is, 3 years into it. I think we understand. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's not about good governing. It's about oligarchy.
Yep.
And so I thought, hey, why not just have a conference, right? Who needs months and months of planning? We'll just do one, right? So this was like September 18th, the 19th of 2020. I said, we're going to do it. Here's what it'll be called. I'll be able to bounce off of my stuff from 2 years earlier. Good friend of mine, Bill Yorka, spoke. Joe Spurgeon from Louisville. Well, Jeffersonville. He's coming up for the fourth one too. He's the only guy that's at all four besides me. And I thought, why don't we just open a forum for discussing the topic of Christianity and culture and the lordship of Christ as applied to every nook and cranny, including the county commissioner. How about that?
Yeah.
And so the first year I spoke on, I just kind of, my talk was more, let's lay out our terminology. Let's make sure we're tracking on the same, because you'll hear one word over here and they'll associate it with this, you know. And so that was my first talk, and we had a good turnout. It wasn't great because, you know, a month out. Had a lot of good friends show up, and then some curious onlookers. The local paper did an article, and so I said, let's do it again. So in 2022, I thought, you know, let's bring in someone with a little bit of visibility, and it was either going to be A.D. Robles, who's just ever the soul of tact, as we all know, Brother Robles, or John Harris. And I appreciated both of what these young guys were doing. What I also saw was I'm not going to bring in a bunch of old guys that are going to go back to their, you mentioned principled pluralism, neutral public square. That's not even a real thing. They don't exist. They never have. So I thought, okay, one of these guys. So I sent an email out, tagged them both. I said, whoever responds first gets the gig. And it was John.
That's great. That's funny.
So he came and spoke on, he just published one of his book, Christianity and Social Justice. I think that's the title. Sorry, John, if I get that wrong. Did a great job. We had a wonderful turnout for that. We fed everybody. It was free. This is our church ministry. We're doing this for you, the body of Christ, the greater church. And we would kind of follow a format where you got a couple speakers in the morning, have lunch. We would go across to that little schoolhouse where Psalm 110, you know, Hail to Jesus was filmed, and just line up the crock pots full of deliciousness, and then have a song. And then I brought in, that year I brought in a guy who had worked in Fort Wayne City Council. So an actual politician, you know, somebody who's had some skin in the game. His talk wasn't wonderful, but his answers in the Q&A were the best.
Okay, great.
He had the best stuff that people were asking, you know, keep nepotism in the family, you know. It was great. It was great. And then last year we did it again, and I was able to get Kurt Nisley, who was an Indiana representative, to speak. And so we just thought, you know, we're running out of space. And so I got a hold of a local campground. It's about 4 minutes away. Everything's timed. Who knows how many miles it is? It's 4 minutes south, right? And so we're hosting it there at Quaker Haven Camp this year. It'll be just one day, again, serving lunch. We're going to do a little more music this year because of Hail to Jesus, the song. And then we just released the video for I Know That My Redeemer Lives out in my woods. Did you see that yet?
I haven't seen it, no.
Oh, jeez. just remember when you're watching that, that's our church and that's my land.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. We've had great feedback on that. And but anyway, we're going to do some more singing this year. I brought in so Joe Spurgeon's coming up again. Joe is great. He's got such a pastor's heart. He really does. You spend time with him. He's no nonsense. He's from West Virginia, so he's bringing that accent with him a little bit. Got a bunch of kids, godly man, and always brings the let's challenge the comfortable Christians in the room message.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So my talks are a little more topical. Here I got the one from 21 was the misspent legacy of Francis Schaeffer.
There you go.
I picked a topic I understood. The whole myth of neutrality and all that stuff. And remember, Francis Schaeffer was a pastor and had a pastor's heart as well. So Joe Spurgeon's great on that end. And then John Harris is coming for his third visit. Can't wait to hear what he's got to say. We've been talking a little bit about his topic, and I'm like, man, this is going to be really good. again, challenging the assumptions, probably more from that, um, I don't know, civil religion, enlightenment, politicking that we're so used to that we just, it seems like that's where people go is, oh, well, the Constitution or Declaration of the Constitution,
Sure.
that's it.
Sure.
You're like, yeah, what did that great philosopher John Adams say? This is for a religious people.
Right.
Once you lose that. And so the other guy I've got is William Wolfe. Not the others. One other guy I'll mention later, but William Wolfe is coming. I spoke with him yesterday. He has actual experience in not just politics in general, but in DC politics.
Right.
And he was recommended by John Harris. He said, "Why don't you reach out to William?" And he didn't like with you. I don't know you from Adam, but we have friends in low places and
Yeah.
associates. And so yeah, I'm looking forward to. And here's the other thing: the other guy I'm bringing is John Moody. John Moody has been involved in food co-ops and food freedom. Because as we all know, a government regulatory agency is only going to sell you a license to give you back rights you already had.
Right.
That's all it is. And it's all done for the public weal and public safety,
Yeah.
So he's going to add, he got interviewed by John, calling him the Christian Tom Bombadil. That's kind of true. He came up and stayed at our house a couple of years ago, and we got to know each other. Just a great guy, lots of ideas, and he's also a judo master. So watch yourself.
That's great.
You might get flipped. So I think the combination of speakers is going to be really really well rounded this year. And we do. If anyone knows me, I want the conference to reflect me as well. So there's going to be some funny stuff. I mean,
sure.
Let's face it. Memes are the Wittenberg door, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Memes can say a lot.
Yeah.
In such a short time. And I think, so this goes back to the music connection, Chase. In songwriting, you've got to be economical. You've got to get your idea across with the least amount of verbiage possible. I was counseling a brother yesterday on our front porch. And I said, you don't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you find. And we both just yelled, "You get what you need." Oh yeah. I'm like, well, okay, we are boomers. Let's face it. But that's a great example of getting a really deep idea. Sting talked about this in Police lyrics and then his later stuff. It's all about economy, and you pare down. That when you're done writing a song, the cutting room floor should be littered. You don't need that. That's throwaway. That gets to the meat of it. It's almost like journalism in a way. So, memes have become a way of communicating truths, and you have to be careful because we don't want to just mock people. That's not fair. You have to do unto others, right? But see, the do unto others should be self-reflective as well. So one of the things we're going to talk about this year is the difference between actually doing politics, being engaged in the political process, while avoiding the kind of posturing that I think we're seeing even this week. Let's face it. There's another YouTube channel I'm involved with, Eschatology Matters. That's run by a couple friends of mine. And I'm one of the contributors there. And one of them wrote me recently and said, "Wow, your conference seems to be just right in the right time for the stuff going on right now." And I hope so. I hope the Lord uses it in that way. But man, it's not fair to get up in front of people and attack a nebulous group and not name names, and do so as a way of maybe it's virtue signaling, it's straw manning, and it just kicked the can down the road a little bit, and you're going to have to go pick it up anyway.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think that's fair. I don't think anyone wants to be treated like that. If someone has an idea that you disagree with, let's say, oh, I don't know, a book gets published. Go figure. And you got a couple questions about it. What's the first thing you're going to do? Well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get on Twitter and I'm going to call this guy a heretic, and I'm going to take a passage that has meaning in its own context, but forget the meaning. I'm just going to say what he said. Those are his words. And we should avoid this man.
Right.
Come on, man. That's I just quoted Joe Biden. Come on, man.
Come on, man.
Come on, man. So boomer. Yeah.
No, it's an interesting topic, and one that I've wrestled with a lot, because like you talk about the MLK 50 back in 2018.
Yeah.
And one of the issues I have is like at this point, and I think a lot of people may perceive me this way, but like a guy like Russell Moore, I don't trust at all. And so he could write this great book that's getting really popular, and I'm gonna immediately just like be like, no, I'm not interested in that and what he's selling and putting out. And I've gotten in trouble, with certain audiences on Facebook for just making that known, because I used to love the guy. I mean, I thought I got his book autograph on the book. I met him and all that stuff. And it's not ill will necessarily, but it's just like, hey, like I've changed my mind on this. This is where I'm at now. And so, like you mentioned, you want to do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. And so it's hard to discern sometimes, because in some ways I'm okay with straw manning. And I know that's a little weird, but my argument is like, look, I'm not going to straw man an argument for pedophilia, or steel man. I'm not going to steel man an argument for pedophilia. I want to paint it in the most extreme, because it is. And I want to show you how bad it is. But when we're talking about somebody who's writing a book, maybe there's some controversial stuff in it, let's represent it, I guess, fairly. Or you think about, another book that came out, it was just reviewed in American Reformer, the book by Andy Stanley, Not in It to Win It. Catchy, right? To the point. You see,
should be on Christian radio. Not in it to win it. Oh yeah, come on.
You could probably do that. It would kill you, but you could probably do it. And then I see it's endorsed by a guy like Ed Stetzer, and to me, it's just a whole network of people who are just swimming in the same waters of the neutral public square and all this kind of stuff. But Andy Stanley's out here promoting homosexuality at his church, and I'm like, well, there go. I'm going to delete anything I have on my computer from Andy Stanley. I'm not interested in what he's putting out. So how do you navigate that when you're thinking about, I mean, you're an older guy. You've seen this stuff crop up before. How do you navigate that stuff?
One of the things we got to remember is that content is content. And if someone wrote a great book in 2005 and espoused a certain couple positions that are just biblical and sound and wonderful, if they change in 2022, that's on them.
Okay.
I'm still going to be able to benefit from that. If someone had a lifetime of what appeared to be faithful ministry and then didn't finish well, I think of Ravi Zacharias. What a heartbreak. We still don't know everything, but it sure seems apparent. I haven't gotten rid of all my Ravi Zacharias stuff.
Okay.
So there was a character like that in the Bible named Demas, and Demas sends his greetings along with the rest of us. This is one of the team. Demas probably taught. By the end of Paul's life, Demas deserted me because he loved this present world. Okay, does that now mean that everything Demas ever said or taught is to be disregarded? No. No, we have to be big boys here. We have to recognize that, okay, now with a guy like Andy Stanley, I'm thinking, I'm not sure that he ever wrote anything worth keeping because of his doctrinal and theological predilections. Right. I would be having issues anyway, but that's a different context. That's a different man. Yeah. I had a good friend of mine, dear friend, thought he was my friend. Benefited from his teaching quite a bit. He was more in the Molinistic side of things. There were a couple times he tried to embarrass me as a Calvinist, and I wasn't having it. But he fell hard. Now, did I take all of the stuff that he ever shared with me and just, I didn't do that. No.
Yeah.
No. What is Alistair Begg say? Even the best of men are men at best. You know,
that's a great way to put it.
We have to watch ourselves. We have to be careful, especially when we start dealing with the pagans on a man-to-man kind of way. You have to be careful. And as one man said, if you're typing on Twitter, share it with the rest of the class. Be willing to say anything like that you would say in front of your mom,
Right.
Jesus. I mean,
Yeah.
It's that whole thing.
Totally. No,
I don't mean be soft in your language.
No.
Use the Bible words, right?
Yeah.
God gave us Bible words, so let's use those words.
Yeah.
Vile passions.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's orientation. Hey, that's your word. God's word says
vile passions.
Vile passions.
That's right.
Good. I'm going to go KJV. My friend yesterday, she goes, man, sometimes with my mother-in-law, I just want to go Old Testament on her. But use those words. Those are good words, and they communicate exactly what God gave us, biblical categories.
Yep. That's really helpful, Tim. Thanks for sharing that with me, because, like over the last 3 years, it's basically been like, I watched, for example, I used to listen to Lecrae's stuff all the time.
Dude.
And then I'm watching what he's doing online. I'm watching who he's platforming him. I'm watching who he's speaking for. Yep. And I just deleted it all from my library.
Yeah.
And I don't do that with everyone, but there's certain cases. I mean, even in the Christian music industry, like my mom loved listening to Amy Grant's Christmas album. That was like the sounds of our home growing up. And then you watch where she's at now, and I'm like, I don't even want to listen to this stuff anymore. Like I don't. Do you know who?
Do you know who Meg Basham is?
Yeah.
Okay, she's great. And she tweeted one day. She goes, "Forgive me, but I never tire of reminding my mom that the artist that she wanted me to listen to, like Amy Grant." And she was comparing that. She liked the edgy Christian stuff. Now I don't know if Love War or Channel Service was in there or not, but what's interesting now, I said that about Demas and some guys that have written good stuff in the past or whatever. I mean, Russ Moore changed his mind. He's now an egalitarian and de facto, right. And I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw two of him. But the guys that I'm still friends with from the Christian music days, that I'm close with, who stayed married, stayed faithful to Jesus and their family and their church, they're some of the better Christian pastors that I know. And they were in the heavy bands. They were our friends. We linked arm in arm, Love War, Precious Death, Atomic Opera, you name it. Go take the list down. One guy's in a Association of Reformed Presbyterian Churches. The other guy's Lutheran Missouri Synod minister. I'm in the Southern Baptist as a 1689 guy. And so Meg's tweet, that warmed my heart.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, this has been a great conversation. I know it'll bless my listeners. I want to make sure we get a good plug in for the conference because it's coming up here soon. What are the dates and how can people find out more?
Right. So it's October 21st, 2023. It's a Saturday at Quaker Haven Camp in Syracuse, Indiana. And I'll send you the Eventbrite link so you can share that as well. And the registration, we've tried to keep expenses way down. We are Hoosiers, so we're cheap dates. It's $15 a head, $25 for a couple, and get this, $40 per family. And we don't care how big your family is.
Oh, wow.
You could have 2 kids, you could have 12 kids. It's $40.
That's awesome. All right, well, I'll make sure to put that in the show notes. Tim, this was wonderful. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Man, great to talk with you. And like I said earlier, I heard your interview about your recent history, and no, heads will roll.
Well, fun times, man. Well,
yeah, right.
Hey, if you're a listener and you enjoyed this episode, give it a great rating, share it with a friend. Make sure you look up this conference. I'll put a link to it in the show notes so you can go sign up and register there. Great price. Great topics, great speakers, so you're going to really enjoy the content. If you enjoy the program, sign up on the Patreon. It really helps me bring more content to you. Put a lot of work into the show. Most of it's put out there for free for the public, so I need all the help I can get. So if you feel like blessing us here at the podcast, then go sign up at the Patreon. Support us at $5 a month, $15 a month. They'll send you a sticker and a mug. It's a great time, and you can give me more guests to have on the show. So thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.